Hey everybody, Andrew Fantasia here. Pull up a chair, get comfortable, and I want you to grab yourself a flowchart because today I want to talk to all of you about cinematic universes. Let's get started. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and give some love to that subscribe button as well. And also check out my novel Side Scroller. It's available now on Amazon.com or CA or UK or wherever you live. It's on Amazon, baby. It's a adventure, science fiction, romance set in a world that runs entirely on video game logic. So if any of that sounds good to you, this is going to sound great to you. Here's the thing about cinematic universes, everybody, particularly shared cinematic universes. They exist. Some of them are great, some of them not so much. And I've done a lot of brainstorming lately about what we have so far in that genre and what we could have but don't yet. And there's potential all over the place. So before we get right down to the meat of this video, let's just take a quick recap look at the big shared cinematic universes we have as we speak. All right, first there's Marvel, the king, the Mac Daddy, the undisputed ruler and champion of shared universes. As far as I'm concerned, as far as a lot of people are concerned, I am not a DC hater. I love what's good, and Marvel has been good to me. So yeah, they're the ones who are doing it right. Next up, we have the DCEU, or the Detective Comics Extended Universe, if you don't like acronyms. And this so far has been a little bit of a rough ride. Not terrible, but not as good as it deserves to be, because I love the DC characters. I love the canon of everything. I love Aquaman and I love Green Lantern and all that stuff, but they're just not pulling out all the stops. They're not making the movies as special as the characters within them deserve to be treated. We've had some hits and misses, but it's not living up to the potential of a shared cinematic universe. In fact, I think it's safe to say that the most critically endearing DC movies, the ones that critics love, are the standalone ones where there is no real crossover. The ones like Aquaman and Wonder Woman. All the more, big crossover-y DC movies get shat on by critics, so there you go. Next, there's Star Wars. Okay, see, back in 2014, Lucasfilm promised a shared Star Wars universe, and they've delivered, even though it's pretty much a different animal from all the others. See, Star Wars is less of a shared cinematic universe and more of a shared multimedia universe. For example, you could get a character who shows up, introduced in a TV show, a Star Wars TV show named Joe Blow, and Joe Blow is in a couple episodes of this TV show, and then maybe half a year later they come out with this novel, and Joe Blow is one of the main characters in that novel, and then maybe, 2 years later, Joe Blow shows up in an actual movie as like a cameo walk-on role, but everybody who's familiar with these knows, hey, look, that's Joe Blow. Wasn't that neat? That's the way Star Wars canon works. It's a little bit more complicated than just a shared cinematic universe, but that's how they roll. So far, they're doing a decent job of keeping all of that tied together, but there's still lots of room for improvement. Legendary's Kaiju universe. Even though I thought Gareth Edwards' Godzilla was a giant disappointment and I felt Kong Skull Island was just meh, I'm still looking forward to seeing this franchise really, swing for the fences. My only concern is, after their next two films, Godzilla King of Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong, where do they go from there? All the major Toho kaiju look like they'll be appearing in King of Monsters, so what'll be left to do after that? I honestly don't know. But at least the franchise has planted the seeds of many new possible monsters for the future, as well as even a rumored eventual crossover with Pacific Rim, which I would be all kinds of down for. Last and least, the Universal Monsters Dark Universe. They tried. It's a real shame because I was really looking forward to this one. This, to me, had the potential to maybe even be better than Marvel, and it just did not deliver. Maybe next time. So, having said that, how can we take this concept of a shared cinematic universe and apply it to other franchises? Some of you are saying that's a horrible idea, and you're probably right, but here's the thing. As a person who grew up as a kid wishing something like the MCU existed, and now as an adult who spends the majority of his time writing things that are along a similar vein as the MCU, I can't help but love what the MCU does, and I can't help but sit and ponder and gaze out my window, dreamily and misty-eyed like on the cover of Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and wonder what would happen if that kind of love and treatment was applied to other franchises. So, having said that, I'm going to present to you today, I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and show you 5 cinematic universes I would love to see if I had been given creative control over certain areas of pop culture and I was allowed to make cinematic universes out of them. Here are 5 that I would love to make. Let's get into it. Number 5, a shared universe of biographies. Okay, we're starting this list off with one that's kind of kooky and weird, but bear with me here. I love biopics, and the majority of people seem to love biopics too. I mean, just look at the box office numbers of Bohemian Rhapsody and you'll know what I'm talking about. But what happens when we take this formula of shared universes and apply it to biographical movies? We might get something like this. Imagine you're watching a biopic where, let's say, Daniel Kaluuya plays Louis Armstrong, okay? So it's a biopic just like Walk the Line or Ray, where the film chronicles the career, life, and legacy of Louis Armstrong. Now, let's say there's a scene in this movie where Louis Armstrong is on the set of the movie High Society in 1956, where he plays his role, and he meets actress Grace Kelly. And she's played by, let's say, Blake Lively, and the two share a scene together. A few months later, we get a biopic about the career, life, and legacy of Grace Kelly, starring Blake Lively. And in that Grace Kelly movie, they cover the period of time during which she filmed Rear Window with Alfred Hitchcock, who might be played here by John Goodman. And a year later, we're lining up in movie theaters to watch John Goodman star in an Alfred Hitchcock biopic. And so on. Sounds crazy, I know, but I think it'd be kind of interesting and a fun little way of telling American history or even world history with a really consistent through line that you can follow to your heart's content. If you saw The Butler, you know that John Cusack can play a scarily good Richard Nixon. So imagine someone makes a bunch of movies about American political history, and every time the plot of any of those movies requires Nixon to show up, even for a cameo, it's John Cusack playing him. This one might be a little hard to pull off, which is why it's only number 5 on the list, but personally I think you could do a lot of fun things with this concept. Maybe just sort of streamline it, make it more focused, so like this shared universe of biographies is only biographies about politicians, or only biographies about movie stars, or only biographies about singers. You know, pick a lane so it's more focused, and you might actually be able to get away with it. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm the only one, but if something like this existed, I'd be the first in line to go and watch it. Number 4, J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World. I put this one low on the list for a couple of reasons, the chief of them being that one could make the argument that there already is a Wizarding World cinematic universe, thanks to the existence of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. I kind of agree, and I kind of don't agree. See, to me, Fantastic Beasts isn't a separate franchise that happens to take place in the same world. It's more of just a basic prequel, like The Phantom Menace to Harry Potter's A New Hope. The story revolves around the dark wizard Grindelwald and how his actions impact the wizarding world in the decades leading up to Harry Potter's birth. We've already gotten young Dumbledore and young Nagini in this series. I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing young Voldemort, young Hagrid, young Flitwick, young Diagon Alley, and so on. To me, Fantastic Beasts has prequel written all over it. So what I want to see is just a bigger exploration of other pockets of the wizarding world. What are the wizards in Japan like? How about the wizards in New York circa 2019? What were the medieval wizards like? It's been said many times throughout Rowling's books that Grindelwald and Voldemort were the 2 worst dark wizards in recent memory. So I don't think setting any more stories in the 20th century would be a good idea, because whoever ends up being the villain in those would have to be a smaller threat than them. Rowling's world is so goddamn beautiful and detailed. There are millions of toys in this sandbox to play with, so play with them. Hell, a few months ago, I came up with a really cool idea for a movie series or even a book series that takes place in the Wizarding World. You want to hear it? Here it is. I'll tell you for free. I don't even give a crap. Here we go. All right. So it's 5 books long or 5 movies long, and it's set in California in the modern day, okay, in 2018. The main character is a girl named Patricia, and Patricia was going to the California Hogwarts, for lack of a better term, but she dropped out in her 5th year, and she's been kind of this runaway living on the streets ever since. And the reason that she dropped out is because Patricia's parents, both her mother and her father, are currently really, really dangerous dark wizards who are tearing a path Bonnie and Clyde style across the USA, recruiting people to their cause and basically trying to take over Makusa. So a representative from the government who knows that Patricia is not really to blame for what her parents are doing is trying to track Patricia down and coax her into going back to finishing her last few years at California Hogwarts. And in the meantime, Patricia's dealing with the fact, everybody's looking at her like, oh, she's the one, her parents killed my friend, her parents killed my parents, etc. She's kind of like the reverse Harry Potter. She's not the girl who lived. She's not the girl who somehow defeated this powerful Dark Lord. No, she's the girl who is the product of 2 very powerful Dark Lords, and she's got to deal with all the anxieties and all the worries that come with being a teenager and having that stress looming over you. Boom! There's a story for the wizarding world from J.K. Rowling's imagination and from my imagination. Make that happen. Somebody make it happen. If not, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write it and I'm going to send it to somewhere. I don't know. I don't know how these things work. I'll probably get sued. That's okay. Number 3. Mad Max. Every single Mad Max flick so far has been set on the continent of Australia because, well, frankly, because that's where George Miller and Mel Gibson come from. But funny thing about Australia, it's the smallest continent on the globe. So when that nuclear war turned everything into a wasteland, what happens to the other 6 continents? The Mad Max movies are so much fun because of how batshit crazy they get and how unapologetically pulpy they are. There's just something so fun about seeing a bunch of crazy characters cobble together patchwork vehicles and then race those vehicles across desolate landscapes, waging war with one another for food, fuel, and resources. Mad Max is the quintessential post-apocalypse story, in a way. Everything else in the genre seems kind of derivative of it. So celebrate that with a shared universe. Because let's be real here, Max Rokitansky is never going to make anybody's list of most likable or relatable hero characters. He's just a guy who broods a lot and drives cars really fast. The introduction of Furiosa in Fury Road serves as proof that George Miller's Wasteland world is full of outstanding new characters who are just waiting to be discovered. And with the possibility of even more colorful villains like Anti-Entity, Blaster Master, and Immortan Joe out there, what's not to get excited about? Again, here's an idea of how you could make this work. Okay, let's say there are 2 siblings. Okay, there's twins. Let's call them Michael and Christine, and they're twins. Now, Michael and Christine live in Chicago. Except at the time that the nuclear apocalypse hit, Christine was actually in Africa doing relief work. So the nukes were dropped, everything turned into a wasteland. Both Michael and Christine survived, but now they're separated by the Atlantic Ocean. Now both of them try to carry on. They start families, they have kids, they eke out an existence in the wasteland world just like all the other characters we've met. But they miss each other terribly. They miss their twin. That's totally understandable. So when Michael starts having kids, he tells his kids all about, you have an Aunt Christine who would love you very much, but she's in Africa, we're never going to see her again. Same thing with Christine. She's telling her kids, you have an Uncle Michael who loves you very much, but he's all the way across the world in the United States. We're never going to see him again. And these kids grow up hearing these stories about this family they have across the sea. And it's very, it gets into their heads. So these movies start like X amount of years later, and the main character of one series could be like Michael's grandson, and the main character of another series could be Christine's granddaughter. And each of them has their own series where they're having all these crazy wasteland adventures and doing car foo and all kinds of crazy shit like that. But they're both aware that they have family somewhere out there across the sea. So in the big crossover event, in the Avengers event of this Mad Max shared universe, one of them crosses the sea into the other one's continent, and maybe somehow the 2 characters finally meet up, and it's like, hey, our grandparents were twin siblings. How about that? Let's meet up and do this big, crazy, epic thing together. There's a story. There's a story you can tell in the Mad Max universe. It's there. It's ready to go. It doesn't always have to be a guy named Max in Australia who's like, I'm angry all the time. You don't need to do that all the time. You can branch out and try new things. There's a new thing. And that's just one idea. If George Miller's imagination has taught us anything, it's that the wasteland world is full of stories to tell. so tell them. Number 2, Ghostbusters. Look, guys, I could write essays on how I feel about the first 2 Ghostbusters films and the 2016 reboot. In fact, I'll save all of that for another video essay someday. But it all boils down to this. I am excited as hell for Jason Reitman's Ghostbusters 3, but I still think you could tell other stories similar to the 2016 reboot in this very colorful, very wide sandbox. Here's the thing. The Ghostbusters began as 3 failed scientists who believed in the paranormal and wanted to do something about that. So, they started a business. And that's the key word here, guys. A business. When businesses take off, they expand. Remember, at one point in time, there was only one McDonald's. Then it got popular enough that some money was thrown its way, and next thing you know, you can't throw a rock without hitting a pair of golden arches anymore. Successful businesses branch off into franchises. Franchise is also another word used to describe a series of movies that take place in the same universe. Seriously, guys, this shit writes itself. Come on! Come on! If you watched Ghostbusters 1 or 2, you know that the Ghostbusters became super popular celebrity figures in the city of New York, and their heroic public persona caused their business to boom. It stands to reason that, with all that money behind them, Egon Spengler would start to franchise the Ghostbusters name. See, New York City is a big place, but it's just one tiny city on a globe virtually covered in cities. When ghosts show up in Los Angeles, or London, or Shanghai, or Cairo, are Peter Venkman and company gonna hop on a plane and fly 16 hours to take care of it? Knowing Peter Venkman? Probably not. Ghosts are everywhere. So, Ghostbusters should be everywhere too. And every team can have its own series of films with its own unique cast of characters and unique ghosts and unique backstories. A team in Canada, a team in Brazil, a team in Kuala Lumpur. And when something really bad starts threatening the world, when you're dealing with ghosts of Cthulhu-sized proportions, who you gonna call? All of them. There's your gargantuan Avengers-sized crossover event practically gift-wrapped for you. The fact that this isn't already a thing is astonishing to me. Who knows, maybe Jason Reitman's 2020 film will be a huge success and it'll kickstart something along these lines. We can only hope. But in the words of Winston Zeddemore, Andrew Fantasia is right and we should totally listen to him. And the number 1 shared cinematic universe I would love to see is a unique horror universe. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, cinema-goers were delighted with colorful slasher characters who terrorized horny teens in movie theaters all across the globe. Guys like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, Chucky, Leatherface, the Cenobites, the list goes on. Even though Freddy vs. Jason was a cute little novelty, it was clear to everyone, even those who made it apparently, that it was nothing more than a trashy, junky popcorn flick about 2 characters who really don't fit in with one another's storylines. And as much as I enjoy all of those old slasher films, I have to agree, they're great on their own, but none of them would mesh well together. That's why I believe the time is ripe for a new crop of characters to come to the forefront. And this time, these slashers will be created with the intent of being part of the same universe from the get-go, as opposed to forcing together 2 pieces from 2 entirely different jigsaw puzzles. For this one to work, I think, first and foremost, that this universe should be one where supernatural things can occur. These slashers aren't just gritty costume serial killers like Mike Myers or Leatherface. They come from realms of the mystic and unknown, like Freddy or Chucky. That way, the sky's the limit when it comes to what kinds of crazy powers these slashers might have and what intricate mythologies might be behind their very existence. Maybe one of them is an amorphous blob kind of creature that takes on the appearance of anybody that it kills. Maybe one of them is a creepy little pumpkin-headed scarecrow child who has psychic control over an army of undead crows. Maybe one of them is like this ghostly witch who can morph into this like giant killer panther. Maybe one of them is a 2-headed circus freak that goes around killing people with a club, but the 2 heads are always arguing with one another because they have clashing personalities. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but look, those are 4 great ideas that I just pulled out of my ass. So you're telling me that a Hollywood think tank of professional writers can't come together and come up with something even better than that? Something that can create these cohesive narratives with different like epic sagas for each character and then pepper in a big crossover event every once in a while that brings these slashers together and we can watch them fight and interact and see what happens. Somebody has to be able to do this. Why can't anybody do this? This is obviously my favorite. This is number one because it's original. Because it's a new concept. It doesn't belong to any pre-existing intellectual property. It's just its new own thing. And it can create a new saga filled with new characters and new stories that generations of filmgoers for years to come will be able to enjoy. So those are my 5 cinematic universes I would absolutely love to see. I would not only love to see them, I would love to write for them and be in them. Like, there's so much you can do. Why isn't anybody doing them? So I hope the right person sees this and maybe thinks, you know what, let's try that, because the world could use a lot more fun stuff. Just saying. Well, guys, I've rambled on quite enough for one day, so there you have it. There's my video essay about shared cinematic universes. Let me know what you think of these 5 ideas, and of course, let me know if you have ideas I didn't think of. If you're like, well, actually, Andrew, I would love to see one of this, and you present me with something, and I'm like, hey, cool, I like that. Let's talk more about that. I want to hear all these ideas. Shoot them my way. I'm Andrew Fantasia. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you here next time, and until then, adios.